and the members of our Equity and Justice Club. Students serving on the panel today are Dwayne Jones II from the class of 2023, Connor Luzon-Sachs, class of 23, Henry Murphy, class of 23, Alex Schmidt, class of 23, and Luke Russ, also from the class of 23. Mr. Pat McHale, a social studies teacher and alumnus from the class of 1987, and Mr. Lina, a 40-year veteran social studies teacher and the originator of the SJCI debate, will serve as the moderators of today's debate between Senator Sean Ryan and Senator Edward Rath. At this time, please welcome both candidates to the debate stage. The Democratic candidate is Senator Sean Ryan. He has served the people of Western New York in the state Senate since 2020. Before his public service career, Senator Ryan worked as a lawyer, including for Neighborhood Legal Services, the Learning Disabilities Association of Western New York, and Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo. Senator Ryan was raised in Lackawanna, the son of a teacher and a firefighter. He's a graduate of SUNY College at Fredonia and Brooklyn Law School. He resides in Buffalo with his wife, Catherine Creighton, and his 2 daughters. The Republican candidate is Senator Edward Rath. Senator Rath was also elected to the state Senate in 2020. He serves as a ranking member of the New York State Elections and Local Government Committees. Prior to being elected to the state Senate, Senator Rath was an Erie County legislator for 13 years. Senator Rath is a graduate of Syracuse University and received his MBA from Canisius College. He is a lifelong Western New York resident. He's married to Amy Rath and father to 3 daughters. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your service to our community, and thank you for agreeing to debate in front of the St. Joseph's Collegiate Institute student population here at the 38th annual SJCI debate. To get the debate started, serving as the moderator of today's debate, please join me in welcoming Mr. Ted Lina.
Good morning, and welcome to the only school in New York State that hosts an annual debate. This year, we are proud to host the debate for New York State Senate. The debate this morning continues a proud tradition that began here in 1984. Over the course of the last 38 years, we have hosted every debate for Erie County Executive. We have also hosted debates for Erie County Sheriff and District Attorney, as well as the House of Representatives and last year, Mayor of Buffalo. This morning's debate is the first time since 2010 that we are hosting a debate for the New York State Senate. 12 years ago, in this gym, an alum of St. Joe's, former county legislator Tim Kennedy, debated Assemblyman Jack Quinn for a seat in the New York State Senate. Senator Kennedy won that race and is still in the Senate today. We are also pleased to have with us this morning a few former students of our school who have decided to serve the community in public office. If they would please stand, we have Council Member Joel Fioretto, class of 2000, all right, and we have Senator Rob Ort, the class of 1997, who is the minority leader in the New York State Senate. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us this morning. Although only some of our students with us today can vote next week, most of them will be participants in this important political right in the upcoming elections. So here we sit in our gym on Kenmore Avenue, at our place that is our home away from home. 233 years after our Constitution was adopted. Public forums then were a mainstay in the early days of our nation. But unfortunately, they have been replaced by slick campaign commercials, sound bites that tell us virtually nothing about the candidates or the issues. Unfortunately, there is a trend locally and nationally to limit debates or to not debate at all. As a man that has spent most of his life teaching American government, I find this extremely disappointing. Political debates allow candidates to explain their position on current issues and allow citizens to become better informed. I encourage everyone here this morning to pay close attention to the exchange of ideas. You are getting information that the general electorate will not be receiving this year. The New York State Senate, along with the State Assembly, was created by the New York State Constitution that was adopted in April of 1977. This document was adopted 12 years before the United States Constitution was ratified in 1789. One of the most significant contributors to our federal Constitution came from New York and has a popular play named after him. Of course, I am referring to Alexander Hamilton. Our state constitution created a three-branch government and a bicameral legislature. You see, the founders did not reinvent the wheel. They relied heavily on state constitutions that all of the delegates were very familiar with, since they were representing their state and not the United States. The New York legislature consists of a lower house, the Assembly, and the upper house, that is the Senate. When our Senate was first formed, 24 senators were elected to a 4-year term. Today, we have 63 senators that are elected to a 2-year term. The Senate and the Assembly are responsible for passing laws dealing with our state budget, criminal behavior and punishment, education policy, taxation, and public welfare. Most recently, they approved the new stadium deal that has been worked out with the Buffalo Bills, to name just a few of their many responsibilities. Before we begin this morning's debate, once again, I would like to thank our two candidates for coming. They have very busy schedules, and especially with the election next week, Tuesday. So I never take it for granted, and I'm grateful that they have done what other candidates will not always do. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank the broadcast and print media for their interest in our debates going back several years. Broadcast stations 2, 4, 7, and Spectrum, especially Susan Rose and Brian Mazurowski of radio station WBEN, along with David Bellavia, a Medal of Honor winner, who has been very complimentary over the years regarding our debates. I also want to mention Eileen Buckley, who is currently with Channel 7 News and has covered our debates for a number of news outlets. And especially, I don't want to forget political journalist Bob McCarthy, who throughout many years has supported the debates here on Kenmore Avenue in this gym. All right, at this time, I would like to lastly thank my friend and colleague from the St. Joe's History Department, Mr. Pat McHale, and Mrs. Katie Potenza, who loves this debate and works diligently to make this a huge success. Before we begin with opening remarks, I'm going to go through the format of the debate with the candidates and with you so you'll know what's going on. A 2-minute statement will begin the debate from each candidate. There will be no rebuttal to opening remarks. A moderator question will be asked for me. The candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer that. They'll each answer the same question. There will be no rebuttal to that. As we begin the questions from our student panel, a direct question will be given to a candidate. The candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to respond, and his opponent will be given 45 seconds in terms of a rebuttal. We will then conclude the debate with a 3-minute closing statement if time permits. Due to a coin toss conducted earlier this morning, Senator Ryan won the toss and has elected to begin this debate this morning with his 2-minute opening statement. Senator Ryan.
Thanks a lot, Ted. It's pretty cool to be here, to be part of this great tradition, and thanks for having me today. I grew up in Lackawanna. I'm a proud graduate of Lackawanna High School. As you heard, my dad was a firefighter, my mom was a teacher, and from them I learned the value of public service and the value of helping others. When I was a senior in high school, the economy of Western New York and New York State changed drastically. The steel industry collapsed. There was no more Bethlehem Steel. Those were tough times, but we made it out of those tough times. We're back into some tough times right now, but I'm confident that we're going to come out of those tough times by employing the right public policy, and we're going to come out of these times stronger than we went in. Walking around the community all summer, people are worried. People have problems. They're worried internationally about the war in Ukraine. They're worried about worldwide inflation, and locally, people are worried about the economy and inflation. People are worried about public safety, the epidemic of gun violence, and women are particularly worried that an extremist Supreme Court is ripping away their hard-fought rights. We've addressed these issues in New York, and we're going to continue to address these issues. During this campaign season, you've seen pandering, you've seen fear-mongering, you've seen the twisting of facts. But I hope after today's discussion, we'll be able to cut through some of that, and it'll be clear that I have the right experience to continue in the New York State Senate, that I sit with the Democratic majority, and that I am the best voice to represent you in Albany.
Thank you. Senator Rath, 2 minutes for your opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you, Ted Lina and Pat McHale, and everyone here for this opportunity to discuss and be a part of this debate, discuss the issues that are important to the people of Western New York and the 61st Senate District. My name is Ed Rath, and I am the senator for the 61st Senate District, and I'm proud to be running for re-election. I was born and raised in the town of Amherst, and I graduated in 1985 from Nichols School. Don't hold that against me, fellas. I also graduated from Syracuse University in 1989 and got my MBA from Canisius College, that is, in 2005. For 13 years, I was a county legislator before I was elected to the state senate. And over that period of time, I worked diligently for the communities that I represent. Every community that I represent, I would go out into the community talking to the leaders, talking to the businesses, and learning their issues, their needs, and their concerns. About my family, I'm so happy my wife Amy is here with me today, and we have 3 daughters, 21, 19, and almost 17. They are my motivation. They are my priority. My priority is to make sure that our daughters and each and every one of you here in this debate and forum today have a Western New York where there's jobs, have a Western New York where there's opportunity, to limit the outflow of citizens and people and businesses that are leaving New York State. As I've gone door to door this year, I've walked over 700 miles going door to door. That's farther than over to Albany, our state capital, and back, visiting 8,000 doors, looking into the eyes of the people. And what are they saying to me? What are their concerns? We have an affordability crisis in New York State. People cannot make ends meet, if it's a cost at the supermarket or the costs at the gas pump. Also, we have a crime crisis. We have to address this crime crisis and make our communities safe by repealing the disastrous cashless bail. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to a spirited discussion, and I welcome my opponent, Sean Ryan, here today as well.
Thank you very much. Just so everybody's aware of what's going on, when the timekeeper raises his hand, each candidate has 15 seconds left. A bell will be rung, and they are then finished with their statement, and we'll allow them finish their statement, but not start a new one. I'm going to begin this debate this morning with a question that I believe is very significant for everybody here in this gym. The timekeeper, each candidate, beginning with Senator Ryan, will have a minute and a half, and there will be no rebuttal. Since the attack at Columbine in 1999, there have been almost 300 additional school shootings, and several hundred students and teachers have been wounded or murdered. 23 years later, schools such as St. Joe's have made several changes regarding the security of our building. Lockdown drills have become the norm here at St. Joe's and every school in this nation. For my generation, it was hiding under a desk to prepare for nuclear attack. That had to be one special desk. At any rate, as you know, education policy is a power that rests with the states and not the federal government. Why has so little been done at the state level to make our schools safer? And what do you think we could or should do to address this very serious issue? Senator Ryan.
It's unbelievable that part of our curriculum is teaching grade school kids how to hide in case a mass shooter comes into your school. But we've accepted that as the norm in America, and it is a distinctly American problem. And we've decided we should fight that problem by hardening schools, putting security systems in place. But what we haven't done is limited the sale of high-capacity assault rifles. All over America, people who should not own assault rifles do, and they are committing heinous crimes with them. But we've accepted that as the norm. So instead of limiting assault rifles in America, we have spent billions of dollars hardening schools. We need a balanced approach, and right now we're balancing this approach towards making schools to be like castles surrounded by moats, but we're not limiting at all 18-year-olds like the top shooter from accessing a weapon of war. There's no need to have these weapons in common circulation in America, and until we address that problem, we are still going to have to wrestle with the issue of school shooting.
Thank you. Senator Rath.
School shootings are an absolute tragedy that happen in our communities. They break the hearts of each and every one of us when we read about them and when we hear about them. And the shooting that happened on May 14th in Buffalo on Jefferson Avenue hit right home. And our community responded to that tragedy with love. It responded coming together and meeting the needs and grieving together and praying together and crying together. Senator Ryan and I were both there with the families. With regards to hardening our schools, it is an unfortunate reality. One of the things we need to do, I believe, is prioritize school resource officers, making sure that the state government provides resources and support to protect our schools. Make no mistake, with regards to the illegal guns on our streets, that's a big part of the problem. Crime happens with illegal guns, not with legal guns. We need to have a plan, a strategy, and an approach for getting the illegal guns off of our streets. Also, mental health. Mental health is under-prioritized, and just recently we started to put more money into mental health. It's been long overdue out of Albany, because a lot of these crimes that happen, these heinous crimes that happen in our schools, are because of the mental health challenges of our children. Let's fund more mental health, and let's reopen what have been closed mental health clinics. This issue is a priority and needs to be focused on, and we'll get it done in Albany.
Thank you. At this point, we will begin questions from our student panel. As I said earlier, each candidate will get a minute and a half for a direct question, and their opponent will have 45 seconds for rebuttal. Our first direct question will go to Senator Ryan.
Recent bail reforms enacted by the state allow those accused of misdemeanors or nonviolent felonies to be granted unsupervised bail. Many New Yorkers believe that recent changes to bail laws have resulted in those accused of crimes being released on bail and committing other crimes once out on the street. According to the City Journal, recent data released by the state confirms those beliefs. For example, the rearrest rate of offenders in the state within 1 month of being released under the new bail guidelines is nearly 18%. Senator Ryan, if elected, would you vote to change the recent bail reforms in light of this new data?
So we have made changes to bail reform 3 times in the last 4 years. It's a problem. People are worried about it. But the mistake we really made in New York is we went nearly 50 years without making any changes to bail reform. We made the changes. We listened to data. We listened to people in the criminal justice system. We changed it again. This year, under Governor Hochul, we came back and made more changes. But we also have to look at crime in general. Crime in Erie County is down. The only part of crime that's up in Erie County is gun crimes. So some people want to talk about bail reform all the time. I want to talk about getting illegal guns off the street and making sure that people who shouldn't have guns don't have them.
Your rebuttal, Senator Rath.
Cashless bail is a total fail. It has failed the residents of New York State. People are dramatically less safe than they were just 3 years ago when cashless bail passed in New York State. I will work to repeal this disastrous law as much as possible because our communities are dramatically less safe. People on the streets are concerned. Businesses are concerned. We just saw last month Kiara Benefield was murdered because her husband was pushed back out on the streets because bail couldn't be used to keep him in jail. It's high time we repeal this disastrous law in New York State.
Thank you. Our next direct question to Senator Rath.
Currently, New York's Minimum Wage Act requires that all employees in New York State outside of New York City receive at least $14.20 an hour in wages beginning December 31st, 2022, up from $13.20 in 2021. This is approximately a 96% increase from a decade ago in 2012 when the minimum wage was $7.25 an hour. However, it is just $3,000 above the poverty line for a family of 4. A bill currently in committee, S3062C, calls for annual increases in the minimum wage that are tied to the inflation rate. Senator Rath, where do you stand on the minimum wage, and will you support this bill if it makes it to the floor for a vote?
Many years ago when I was a lifeguard in the town of Amherst, I worked at minimum wage. Was well under $5. So minimum wage is a number that is, I believe, has to be tied to the cost of living and has to be tied to the challenges for people to make ends meet. The number of $14.20 an hour, I believe, should be reasonably scaled to the inflationary pressures that people feel in our communities. Folks, make no mistake, inflation is up 8%. 8% is a record high for inflation. And what are we seeing? An affordability crisis. Your question is actually rooted in affordability. People can't make ends meet. And what are we talking about? Raising the minimum wage to make ends meet. Guess what? The costs at the supermarket, the cost at the gas station, and the energy bills to heat our houses, through the roof. So this is one aspect, or one angle, if you will, on the affordability crisis that needs to be addressed. Albany has been tone deaf on this issue and has not provided solutions for people to make ends meet. So this issue, I will study it like every issue, read the merits of the issue, pay attention to it, and make a decision based on what I think is right. Thank you.
Thank you. Your rebuttal, Senator Ryan.
Albany has been far from tone deaf on this issue. When the United States government failed to act to raise the minimum wage, we acted as a state to raise the minimum wage. We looked at the economy and discovered too many people were working full-time jobs but couldn't afford to put a roof on their house, couldn't afford to take their kids to the dentist. We raised the minimum wage, and we should raise it again, and we should keep it indexed to make sure we don't fall into a trough where 20 years go by and minimum wage is not raised.
Thank you. Our next direct question to Senator Ryan.
The new Bills Stadium deal will keep the team in Buffalo for the next 30 years. It has a price tag of $1.4 billion, $250 million of which will be paid for by Erie County, and $600 million by New York State. Many people, including some local officials, believe that the cost of the stadium is what it will take to keep Buffalo as an NFL city. The Hochul administration says the stadium will act as a multi-purpose facility and that the economic and tax benefits will eventually exceed the $850 million in public funds that will be spent. Many New Yorkers outside of Western New York are skeptical about such claims, especially in that what benefits there will be localized and not spread across the state. Many economists, too, don't believe the huge expenditures of public funds on sports stadiums is the best use of limited tax dollars. Senator Ryan, how would you justify so much spending as a worthwhile investment for taxpayers, not just in Erie County, but across the New York State?
So the economists always say that the private sector should be funding stadiums, and most communities agree with that. But guess what? That's not how it works. If you want to keep a big league sports team, the public is going to pay for the stadium. We negotiated a tough but a fair deal with the Pagulas. And you hear from downstaters that maybe we shouldn't have spent all this money. But those downstaters were awfully quiet when we put public resources into Yankee Stadium, into the Barclays Center for the Nets, and into the new home of the Islanders. Here's where it's a good economic development deal. There's a project labor agreement, and everybody working at that stadium will be paid a union wage. So everyone working there is going to contribute to our economy. That's a good thing. And the state is taking the maintenance costs of that stadium off of the county. That makes sense also because the biggest tax revenues coming out of the stadium is the income tax paid by the players. So that'll go back to the state, and the state will use that money to continue to maintain that stadium. And the biggest threat right now to keeping the Bills in Western New York is the gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin saying he wants to renegotiate that deal. We have a deal that's going to keep the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo for 30 years, and for that, I say go Bills.
Thank you. Your rebuttal, Senator Rath.
As I was driving over here this morning at the corner of Englewood and Kenmore, there's a sign that says, "This is our year, Buffalo Bills." Guess what? It is our year this year for the Buffalo Bills, and it's going to be for decades to come when we keep the Buffalo Bills here in Western New York. We are the only team in New York State, not the Giants nor the Jets. I'm a Buffalo Bills season ticket holder, have been so for decades. This is a great deal for Western New York. Yes, the state has $600 million, but guess what? We provide $1 billion a year to the New York MTA for their subway system. We also provided billions of dollars for additional projects. This stadium will provide a return on investment for our community and keep the Bills here for Western New York, and Josh Allen will be MVP this year, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much for your optimism. All right, from both candidates. Our next direct question to Senator Rath.
This past June, in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, Inc. v. Bruin, the Supreme Court overturned a long-standing New York gun safety law that required gun owners to show proper cause for applying for a license to carry concealed weapons in public places. Shortly after, Governor Hochul signed new gun legislation that would strengthen background checks and require live fire training for individuals seeking to obtain concealed carry permits. It would also prohibit concealed carry permit holders from bringing their firearms into sensitive locations, including Times Square in Manhattan, bars, libraries, schools, government buildings, and hospitals, as well as require renewal or recertification of permit every 3 years. Senator Rath, do you support these gun safety measures?
I support reasonable gun safety measures. And what happened this year with regards to the new gun safety measures in Albany was a piece of legislation that it turns out is somewhat flawed. There are aspects of it that are determined to be unconstitutional right now. Quite often in Albany, what we see is a rush to get legislation done without properly drafting the legislation and putting what is legal before the state Senate and the state legislature. The challenge that we have in our community with safety, number one, is cashless bail. What we need to do if we're going to get criminals off of the streets is repeal cashless bail. That's step number one, and that should be our highest priority. We've referenced earlier illegal guns. Almost all crimes are committed with illegal guns. What we need to do is have a plan to get those illegal guns off of our streets. With regards to protecting our communities, of course, it should be the responsibility of each and every state senator, my opponent and I together, to protect our communities. Let's have a reasonable plan. Let's have sensible legislation, and let's have something that we know works closely with law enforcement. Law enforcement has endorsed me this year, 5 law endorsement groups, including the sheriff, City of Buffalo PBA, the town of Amherst. I will work with them on sensible legislation that protects our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ryan, your rebuttal?
The biggest crime increases in Erie County have to do with gun crime. We can keep talking about cashless bail, but that is not addressing the issue. After the shooting on Tops, it's true, Senator Rath and I were together helping the community, but I went back to Albany. I did more than thoughts and prayers. I went back to Albany and I passed laws that made it so an 18-year-old can't buy an assault weapon. We made it harder for assault weapons to be circulated. I voted yes. Senator Rath voted no. I have an F rating from the NRA. Senator Rath has an A rating.
Thank you. Our next direct question is Senator Ryan.
The legal status of abortion has been an extremely contentious issue for decades. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court overturned the 50-year-old precedent established in Roe v. Wade, allowing the decision whether to ban abortion or to keep it legal to be made by the states. In the wake of this ruling, New York passed a legislation package that supported reproductive rights and services that includes protections for women who come to New York from states that have banned abortion. Governor Hochul also announced that $35 million would be available to support abortion providers in New York. Many New Yorkers disapprove of the idea that the state is using taxpayer money for this. Senator Ryan, do you approve of the use of tax money to support access to abortions, even potentially for non-residents of the state?
The number one issue on women's minds in Western New York State, and the country is the banning of abortions. For 50 years, it was settled law in the United States. The right that my mom had, that my wife had, will no longer be available to my daughters. That is a radical Supreme Court going down the wrong path. After the Supreme Court overturned the Roe versus Wade, we went back to Albany and we passed a series of protections. We passed protections making it so doctors in New York State could not be jailed for providing reproductive services for a woman out of state. I voted yes on that legislation. Senator Rath voted no on that legislation. I believe it's a woman's right to choose. It's a woman, her family, and her doctor. Doctors' offices are small. There's no room for Senator Rath in that office, and there's no room for law enforcement. It's a woman's right.
Thank you. Your rebuttal, Senator Rath?
Women's reproductive rights are codified in New York State. What that means is it's written into the Constitution. Changing that is incredibly unlikely and not going to happen based on the state legislature that we have right now. Let me be very clear on this issue, because in this campaign, there has been misinformation and mischaracterization of my position. In the cases of rape, incest, and the life of the mother, of course I support women's reproductive rights. There are aspects where I think that some of the legislation is extreme. We should not be allowing for late-term convenience abortions, and we should not be making New York State a destination for out-of-staters and out-of-state doctors when it comes to reproductive services.
Thank you. We will now have a direct question to Senator Rath from Dwayne James, representing the Equity and Justice Club.
On May 14th, 2022 at 2:30 p.m., the top shooting on Jefferson Avenue occurred. The suspect drove several hours from Conklin, New York to get to the Tops, which was located in a heavily black neighborhood. 13 people were shot, resulting in 10 black individuals being killed. This left many people wondering, how will officials react and what will they do about the supermarket? After the shooting, the Tops remained closed for 9 weeks until July 15th. This once again left another food desert on the east side of Buffalo due to lack of transportation for many people in the neighborhood. Although the Tops has since reopened, many people are afraid to shop there due to trauma from the shooting and in fear that a shooting like that could happen again. To put it plainly, the east side of Buffalo needs places where residents can buy food. Senator Rath, what measures would you support to incentivize more grocery stores moving into traditionally underserved communities like the east side of Buffalo.
First of all, you touched on May 14th, and I want to remind everyone how amazingly incredible our community responded to that tragedy. We responded with love, we locked arms, and we provided services into that community. That was a moment in which Buffalo, we saw our true nature of the city of good neighbors. With regards to the food deserts on the east side, what we need to do is be working with businesses, working with developers, and assessing the needs of the community. Developers and builders many times have state senators, my opponent included, that works against them. What we should be doing is using our ECIDA, which provides reasonable inducements for businesses to have investment in their communities. We should be assessing the needs as to where the growth and development should be happening. We can be providing jobs, creating opportunity, and creating investment in the east side. It's certainly needed. I have toured the east side and talked to businesses, talked to leaders who said, yes, we need more growth. Growth happens when government and businesses work together, not when they work against each other. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Business Council, proud to have the endorsement of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, as well as Upstate United. These business groups know I'm the right person to partner with business and create solutions and growth on the east side of Buffalo. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Ryan, your rebuttal?
You know, returning to the top shooting, it's such a heartbreaking tragedy. But we have to look at the facts around that shooting. You know, we keep hearing about, getting illegal guns out of people's hands. The person who committed the shooting at Tops was a legal gun owner. It wasn't an illegal gun. It only became illegal when he used it to commit violence. The shooter at Parkland was a legal gun owner. The Newstead shooting of 4 family members, legal gun owners. After the shooting at Tops, we went back, we put together a series of common sense gun laws, including strengthening red flag laws. I proudly supported those laws. My opponent voted no.
Thank you. Our next direct question is Senator Ryan.
In 2020, then Governor Andrew Cuomo issued Executive Order 203, which required all New York State local governments to adopt a police reform plan by April 1st, 2021. Since then, 90% of police agencies had submitted plans. In Rochester, for example, the plan included a reduction in police force size and a change in the hiring system. In Yonkers, the plan called for the creation of a mental health crisis team and fewer police officers in schools. In the city of Buffalo, reforms included a ban on chokeholds and the creation of the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, or LEAD, which is a behavioral health team trained to respond to low-level offenses. Senator Ryan, do you think reforms such as these are the answer to help reduce crime in our state, or do you favor a different approach?
So reform isn't something that should only happen in response to tragedies. Reform should be ongoing. We should always question how we do things. Your school questions constantly how we do things, how do we make it better? So I'm happy with the efforts that have been taking place throughout New York State. Every town, every village, every city has gotten together and said, how can we better serve our citizens? And what came up a lot in those discussions is the police departments need more funding. So in this year's budget, we put unprecedented funding towards state troopers and to local law enforcement. You go to any community in Buffalo or anywhere else in this community and say, do we need more police or less police? People will resoundingly answer, we need more police and we want to have a better police department. And you do that is by continue to be to search for excellence and not just have reform be a one-off, but you need to keep it going.
Thank you. Your rebuttal, Senator Rath?
It's interesting hearing my opponent talk about police funding when last year he endorsed India Walton for mayor. India Walton wanted to defund the police by 20% or $7.5 million. That's a fact. With regards to law enforcement, with regards to the police, they need government to be their partner. I have sat down with every police chief and every member of law enforcement in this new 61st Senate District, and they believe that government is not providing enough resources. Government is not providing enough support. And what they need is, what we all need is a repeal of cashless bail. Let's get these criminals off of our streets. That's the first step to safety, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next direct question is Senator Rath.
According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor, inflation has risen 15% since 2020. This is more than over the previous 8 years in which the inflation rose 14%. New Yorkers have stressed about prices at the pump and at the grocery store. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the average gallon of gas in December of 2020 cost $2.19. However, now a gallon of gas averages $3.76 for an increase of $1.57. The price of eggs has also risen dramatically in the past few years. The U.S. Bureau of Labor estimates that the average cost of a dozen eggs is up nearly $2 since 2019. It is often said that people vote based on the economy. With the cost of basic goods still rising and the holidays right around the corner, what will you do to help lower inflation and provide relief to the struggling New York families?
This is a very important question about affordability. We've talked about affordability earlier, and let me tell you this. Inflation is nothing other than a tax on the middle class. And inflation is a result of monetary policy from the federal government. What we can do in Albany is we can address this affordability crisis by making New York State more affordable. Energy costs in New York State are 56% higher than the rest of the country. And why is that? Partially because of our taxes and surcharges, temporary taxes and surcharges that we're assessing that must be repealed. I also believe there should be a home heating tax credit for middle-class families in New York State, providing real relief, because natural gas costs are going to be up 50% this winter, and pretty soon it's going to get cold in Western New York to heat our homes. Supermarket costs up 15 to 25%. We have an affordability crisis, and when I'm going door to door talking to young families, they're struggling to make ends meet. They might have to make decisions between putting food on the table and paying their energy bills. Let's lower the incredibly high taxes we also have in New York State. Taxes and regulations are 50th out of 50 by way of affordability in New York State. That's the worst state in the country, as proven by Wallet Hub this past April. Let's fix this affordability crisis and make New York back to the Empire State.
Senator Ryan, your rebuttal?
Inflation's a worldwide problem. Coming out of the pandemic, you've seen inflation rise everywhere in the world. It's a problem. People know it's a problem. What inflation does, it erodes the money in your wallet. And as that was happening, New York State took steps to keep money in people's wallet. We cut taxes on the middle class. We accelerated the property tax rebate. We cut gas taxes, and we made more money available for child care. New York State's doing what it can. We're not the federal government. We don't control the interest rates, but we're going to keep up with proactive policies to keep more money into people's wallets.
Thank you. Your rebuttal, Senator Rath?
Was that his rebuttal?
Oh, was that? I apologize. Senator, okay, next direct question then.
The New York State Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act was signed into law on March 31st of 2021 by former Governor Andrew Cuomo. This act authorized adult use recreational cannabis and the lawful use of medical cannabis effective immediately. The New York Times estimates that the New York market could reach $4.2 billion in revenue by 2027, making it one of the nation's largest. It remains illegal to drive under the influence of marijuana, just as it's illegal to drive while intoxicated by alcohol. Under the new law, the New York Health Department will be required to look at emerging devices that could potentially allow officers to use a saliva test to detect whether a driver is under the influence of cannabis. Senator Ryan, what measures do you support so that New York State can profit from the sale of cannabis while at the same time keeping its citizens safe?
So the legalization in marijuana was a slow ship in New York State. A lot of states jumped on right away, but they didn't have the best results. Colorado launched out, not so good. California, not so good. Ontario had a very good program, but we took our time and we watched what other states did, and we also really, frankly, watched what failed in other states. So we put together a program that's supposed to be able to keep as much marijuana revenues as possible in the state. It's got to be grown here. I visited a marijuana farm. It's quite exceptional. It's got to be processed here. It's got to be dispensed here. So we're trying to keep it all in the ecosystem. We know the difference between marijuana and alcohol in a traffic stop is that it's harder to test for it. But we also know that we've trained law enforcement to do all sorts of tests to determine whether someone's has an impaired ability, whether they're drinking or using any kind of drugs. You touch your nose, you walk the line, and that's how officers can determine if somebody's impaired with or without a test. But as marijuana is going to become legalized, we have to make sure we take the appropriate steps to keep it out of the hands of children. We limited the advertisement allowed by the marijuana companies, and we need to continue to make sure that the DWI type units are trained up to par, and hopefully we'll be able to develop an easy test like alcohol.
Your rebuttal, Senator Rath?
New York State may have taken its time, but it still got it wrong. This piece of legislation was flawed, like so many other things we see out of New York State. I sat down with law enforcement. I sat down with mental health specialists. I sat down with addiction services specialists. They all are deeply concerned with the legalization of recreational marijuana. And folks, to use revenue as a justification over public safety, that's just wrong. We shouldn't be focused on money. We should be focused on public safety and having a piece of legislation that protects our communities. Right now, we do not have that. I voted against it because it was poorly drafted, and we need to fix this.
Our last panel-directed question will go to Senator Rath, and then this will be followed with a moderator question and closing statements. So our last direct question, please, to Senator Rath.
A school voucher system is a program in which the state gives parents vouchers that can be applied to the cost of a school other than the neighborhood school most children must attend. Such programs allow parents to use public funding allocated for their child's education toward tuition at a private school of their choice, including religiously affiliated private schools. The hope is that a school voucher would allow lower-income families who often have to go to lower-performing schools to be able to afford to attend a higher-performing school. Critics of such programs argue that vouchers merely siphon money from schools that desperately need it. Despite the contentiousness of this issue, nearly 30 states have vouchers or some closely related form of private school choice, according to the National Conference of State Legislators. Senator Rath, do you support the creation of government-funded school voucher programs?
Yes, I do support school voucher programs. It's working in 30 states. They're getting it right. We should look at the model that they're using, and we should follow that model and see what we can learn from it. New York State does not need to reinvent the wheel with this issue. Maybe just build a better wheel. Parents should have choices with regards to where their kids go to school. I went to public school through 8th grade, then I went to Nichols School, which I told you all about. A school voucher program gives parents a viable choice. Many times in our public schools, through no fault of the teachers or the administrators, schools are not performing up to par. If parents and students working with their parents have a choice to use a voucher system, it should be available to them. As a parent of 3, my wife and I want what's best for our children. Your parents should have that same opportunity, and parents of every income level should have that exact same opportunity through a voucher program. So yes, I'm supportive of it. Let's be measured. Let's also be thoughtful of our public school system and supporting them and making sure that they have adequate resources as well. Once again, it's not the fault of the teachers in the public schools. It's not the fault of the administrators, but parents need a choice, and I do support that.
Senator Ryan, your rebuttal.
So every state seems to siphon money to private schools in different ways. We don't have a voucher program in New York State, but money comes into private schools through things like a book fee and attendance fee. So we do put money into private schools in New York State. We just do it in a different way. But I don't support a voucher program. Almost every voucher program that I've looked at, it leads with, this will help give poor kids a choice, but it almost always ends up with helping pay rich kids tuition at Nichols, and it takes away from the public schools. So we have an obligation to adequately fund public schools in New York State. I'm going to continue to do that.
Thank you. This question will be directed to both candidates. It's our last moderator question. We will begin with Senator Ryan, And after this, then we'll have our closing remarks. A minute and a half will be allotted. With the increasing polarization of our two major parties and the electorate as well, we have witnessed an increase in threats and violence regarding our public officials. This past week, a 42-year-old man entered Speaker Pelosi's home with the intent of kidnapping her. When he found that she was not there, he attacked her husband with a hammer. He has been charged with attempted kidnapping and assault. In June of this year, a 26-year-old man with a gun was arrested near Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's home and has been charged with attempted murder. What do you believe has led to this increase in violence and extreme anger in our nation toward our public officials? Senator Ryan.
This is a question that is befuddling America. How in a very short years did we turn from a country that had civil debate to a country where people vilify one another, where people don't want to be in the same room as people from political parties. A good friend of mine works at the Ford plant, and he said, for 20 years I worked at the Ford plant. I had no idea if my coworker was a Republican or a Democrat. He goes, but I do now, and I don't want to know. I don't want to know who's a MAGA Trump guy in this plant. What does this have to do with working at the Ford plant? But all over America, the temperature is being turned up, and it's being turned up in a way that is not good for our democracy. Nancy Pelosi's husband was hit with a hammer. It was an attempted assassination attempt on Nancy Pelosi. And what do we hear? We hear all over Fox News jokes about it. How do we make jokes about an attempted political assassination in our country? It's not the way we go. I've been in elected office for 10 years. This campaign's been different. This campaign's been disinformation, fear-mongering, mudslinging. The stuff that's been coming into the mailboxes should not be coming into mailboxes. We need more civil debates like this where we can talk with our voices down and get the issues out on the table. But I fear that we are heading the wrong way in America.
Senator Rath.
The polarization in New York State and in America is a huge problem. Let me tell you guys the way that I operate as a public official. Sean and I may disagree, and I may disagree with other people on the other side of the aisle, but I will never be disagreeable. There's a big difference. We should be working with open hands and not closed fists when it comes to government and leadership. I'll tell you, as we look at the reasonableness in Albany, we are devoid of reasonableness and rational thought and rational discussion. Part of that is because we have one single party in total control. Right now, I sit in the super minority in the state Senate. It's difficult for us to get reasonable dialogue and reasonable issues before people because of this hyper-partisan polarization that we're seeing. The people deserve better. This is antithetical to what the Founding Fathers had in mind 230 plus years ago when they wanted a two-party system. They wanted a two-party system with checks and balances, a two-party system with reasonable dialogue and reasonable solutions. We can lower the temperature in New York State. We can lower the temperature in this campaign. The extremism and the partisanship has been going both ways with regards to this campaign. Everyone's mailboxes have been filled with negative information and misinformation. That's not one-sided. We can fix this, and we must, because hyper-partisan needs to stop, and common sense government for the people needs to begin once again.
Thank you. We will now close the debate with closing remarks, beginning with Senator Rath.
First of all, I want to thank St. Joe's. I want to thank all of the moderators, Ted Lina and Pat McHale, for the opportunity to be here today. This has been an honor for me to sit here and listen to your thoughtful questions about the issues that are important to the people of the 61st Senate District. I have gone out into the community, and I have listened and paid attention to what their concerns are, and my campaign priorities are consistent with the people's concerns in this district. In Amherst last week, as I was going door to door, I came across a family. It was Grace and Brett and their two boys playing in the front yard. Grace was practically in tears, saying that the cost at the supermarket is twice as expensive as it was just 3 years ago. Brett said he doesn't know how they're going to be able to afford energy costs this year. This is a young family just starting out and they're struggling. We have to fix this affordability crisis in New York State. It can be done and it must be done. With regards to public safety and crime, 2 days ago I was going door to door in Tonawanda. I met a man by the name of Bob. He said, what are you going to do to address this crime and public safety crisis? Another kitchen table issue that people are concerned about. I said, first thing first, repeal this disastrous cashless bail law. Let's get these criminals off of the streets. Let's give judges the discretion they need for dangerousness. That's why Kiara Benefield does not have her life today, because a judge did not have a dangerousness standard to use, and her husband killed her because he was released without bail. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that I am the best candidate to run for this office. I believe I am the candidate who's most in touch with the issues in Amherst and the Tonawandas, Grand Island, and the city of Buffalo, because I've spent the time in the public sector working in government, because I've got 30 years business experience. I know the challenges of businesses as well. Most importantly, either during early voting or on November 8th, please get out and vote. This is a critically important election. You've heard the differences between me and my candidate. Once again, opponent, I should say. I believe that I am the right person to fit this job to meet the needs of all of the community. And ladies and gentlemen, with the affordability and the crime crisis, we can and we must do better. The status quo in Albany is what we are seeing right now. It's time to change that status quo and bring about real change that prioritizes citizens, not criminals, real change that lowers our incredibly high tax burden, real change that meets the needs of all of our communities, real change that gives you all an opportunity to settle in Buffalo versus the mass exodus we have seen out of New York State. In the last 3 years, more people have left New York State than any other state in the country. Why? Because of taxes, because of regulations. I have 5 nieces and nephews. 80% of them, 4 out of 5 are gone. We can and we must do better in New York State. Give me that opportunity as your next state senator. I'm asking for your support. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Senator Ryan, your closing remarks.
The Kiara Benefield murder was a tragedy. She was failed at every step of the system. But right now, she's being re-victimized. She's being re-victimized by politicians who are trying to score cheap points in an election year. If a woman is murdered in America, nearly half the time it's her husband or domestic partner who committed the murder. If you mix domestic violence with firearms, you have a deadly situation. I have taken steps in vote after vote to separate abusers from firearms. I voted yes on those issues. My opponent voted no on these issues. The #1 crime going up in Erie County are gun crimes. We need to have sensible gun laws, and we need to keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them. If you listen to my opponent, it's almost a dystopian view of our community. Buffalo's a community on a rise. For the first time in 50 years, we've had increased population. Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. But all you hear is doom and gloom. One of the ways we increased our population in our upstate cities is by welcoming refugees. I've proudly supported more money to help refugees settle into our community, to help them integrate into our economy, into our school district. For the last 4 years, New York State has been funding programs to help refugees resettle. I led those efforts. Last year's budget, we doubled that amount. I voted yes for funding for refugees. My opponent voted no. So you sort of can't have it both ways. You know, you can't pull a wallet hub fact out saying people are leaving New York State when you live in a community that's growing. And if you look at the same Wallet Hub website, it says New York State's the 6th most affordable state in the nation. So facts matter, but it's really easy to twist facts around. But that's why I'm hoping today we have, through this rational conversation, you can make the determination that I have the experience to continue to serve in Albany, that I serve with the Democratic majority, and that I am the best candidate to represent you in Albany.
Thank you very much. Before we present them with a token of our appreciation, I've been asked by the media a number of times, Ted, what makes a successful debate? This makes a successful debate. Why? They answered the questions. Each question was answered. They may disagree ideologically, but there were no insults, no interruptions, no cheap shots, unlike many debates that I have watched in the public arena. So I want to thank each of these two men. This is a phenomenal educational opportunity. This is what we should do and do in our classrooms, and thank you so much. Louis Canada, our student council president, will present them with a token of our appreciation. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Good morning, Senator Rath, Senator Ryan, St. Joe students and faculty. My name is Louis Canada, and I am the president of Student Council here at St. Joe's. On the behalf of the St. Joe's community, we really appreciate the both of you being here today. We know that you're taking time out of your very busy schedules, and we beyond appreciate your appearance here. This debate gives our students an interesting and important understanding of the different perspectives of each candidate's viewpoints and a first look into learning about debates and politics. For a token of our appreciation, the St. Joe's community would like to present to you these gifts. Thank you so much for being here today, and the best of luck to both of you in the future. Thank you. Really? Cool. Yeah.
Students, you guys did a great job during the debate. At this time, you are dismissed to Mr. Spillman. What period are we going to? Bleachers first to what period, Mr. Spillman? To third period. You're going to your third period class. AP Government students and Equity and Justice students, please stick around for the photographer.